So good afternoon. Welcome to our side event, Carbon Neutrality, the Future of Asia Pacific, Contribution to the Transition Toward Decarbonization. My name is Eric Zussman, and I am a research leader at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. On behalf of the organizing institutions, the government of Japan, the government of France, the United Nations Environment Program, UNSCAP, and IGES, I would like to thank everyone for taking time from their busy schedules to join us here today. To kick off the program, I'm pleased to invite Mr. Kondo Tomohiro, the Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Ministry of Environment, Government of Japan, for his opening remarks. Mr. Kondo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator Zussman-san. I am Kondo Tomohiro, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs from the Ministry of the Environment, Japan. I would like to say a few opening words to the side event on carbon neutrality, the future of Asia-Pacific contribution to the transition toward decarbonization. First, let me express my gratitude to the Embassy of France in Thailand, the United Nations issue-based coalition on climate change mitigation and air pollution, and the Embassy of Japan in Thailand for jointly organizing this event, to IGES for this support, and to all of you for your participation. This Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which will be held until the 26th, discusses the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in the Asia-Pacific region and serves as a preparatory meeting to the high-level political forum to be held in July. Among the many SDGs, today's side event will focus on climate change. In the run-up to COP26, which will be held in November this year, countries are accelerating their decarbonization efforts. More than 120 countries have now declared their commitment to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, including many countries in the Asia-Pacific region, including Nepal and Japan. In this context, it's crucial to encourage decarbonization initiatives led by cities, which are main carbon emitters, to ensure the transition to decarbonization of the rapidly growing Asia-Pacific region. In Japan, the number of zero-carbon cities or local governments committing to zero carbon emission by 2050 has now exceeded 300, including city of Kyoto, representing more than 100 million people. Japan aims to utilize the decarbonization experiences and best practices implemented in its cities to encourage the decarbonization of developing countries. 13 countries and 39 cities are partnering with Japan in Cities to City collaboration program, including between Metropolitan Bangkok and Yokohama City, and between Quezon City and Osaka City. Last week, on the 17th and 18th, we held a Zero Carbon City International Forum with UNFCCC to focus on the transition to decarbonization of cities. This forum highlighted the importance of decarbonization efforts led by cities, as well as the role of central governments and international organizations in encouraging cities' transition to decarbonization. As a result, Kuala Lumpur City newly pledged to achieve decarbonization by 2050 with the cooperation of two countries. Today's event, focusing on the rapidly developing Asia-Pacific region, gathers local governments, countries, international agencies, and members of the academia, such as Professor Takamura Sensei from the University of Tokyo, to share opinions from a variety of perspectives. Let me conclude my expectation that the identification of decarbonization initiatives carried out by leading cities. We plan to support these efforts, expand them nationally, leading to a large-scale decarbonization domino effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kondo, for that warm welcome. Now I would like to have some opening remarks from His Excellency Thierry Matteau, the designate French ambassador in Thailand. Mr. Mato is going to present these messages through a video.
Dear colleagues, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to open this important side event jointly organized by France, Japan, and the UN HESCAP Environmental and Development Division in the context of the 8th Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development. The COVID-19 crisis, which started more than 1 year ago, has clearly showed the interconnection between animal and human health and the strong links with biodiversity, climate change, and pollution. From now on, it is urgent to aggregate those issues into new concepts and encourage a more systemic approach to properly manage and address challenges to be implemented in all sectors for a sustainable future of our planet. For France, issues related to climate change and biodiversity are at the top of our agenda. Regarding climate change, much progress has been made since 2015 and the adoption of the first Universal Climate Agreement, also known as the Paris Agreement. The European Union is committed to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 and the reduction of its greenhouse gas emission by 55% by 2030 as compared to 1990. Last December, at the Climate Ambition Summit, more than 70 countries made ambition announcements. For this year, our objective is to make COP26 a success and finalize the rules for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. In addition to that, it is important to strengthen climate finance and to meet the expectations and the needs of the most vulnerable countries. On the occasion of the Climate Ambition Summit, France has pledged to spend 6 billion euros a year on its climate development aid, a third of which more specifically on adaptation actions. With rapid industrialization and urbanization, Southeast Asian countries, which are home to a very significant biodiversity, face all those challenges. They also face serious economic and health issues, especially in their poorest areas. In this context, the nexus of biodiversity, animal and human health, and climate change need specific attention. The Southeast Asia region is at the heart of the inclusive French Indo-Pacific strategy based on multilateralism and cooperation, especially on global issues with countries and institutions. This strategy is being implemented through expertise to raise awareness on major stakeholders regarding the environmental challenges I have just mentioned. France is willing to be more involved in Asia and the Pacific through further systemic research and leverage of political will and capacity building. We can build upon recent governmental initiatives such as PRISOD on the One Health approach, which was launched at the One Planet Summit on Biodiversity last January by the President of the French Republic. France also believes approaches such as planetary health and projects dealing with climate, plastic, and air pollution can also make a very useful contribution to the sustainable development in the region. I believe this forum and the four-side events on air pollution, marine plastic pollution, carbon neutrality, and the nexus, biodiversity, ecosystem, health, and climate, which the French Embassy is co-organizing, will facilitate transdisciplinary discussions in the context of the crisis we are currently facing. Those events build upon the presence in Thailand of several French experts from our major research centers like CIRAD, CNRS, and RID, and also experts based in France. Therefore, I would like to thank ESCAP, in particular its Environment and Development Division, for the opportunity offered to both Japan and France to share this original contribution and expertise to decision makers and other stakeholders. I have no doubt that this opportunity will be a milestone to further reinforce collaboration and synergies and collectively address future challenges in a context marked by extremely rapid ecological and social changes and the need to build back better in the post-COVID context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those poignant remarks, Mr. Mato. Now I would like to invite Ms. Armida Salcia, the Executive Director of ESCAP, for her open remarks. Ms. Armida, the floor is yours.
Dear distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, may I start by expressing appreciation to the Ministry of Environment of Japan, the Embassy of Japan in Thailand, and the Embassy of France in Thailand for co-organizing this side event along with the UN issue-based coalition on climate change mitigation and air pollution, which is co-led by ESCAP and UNEP. This discussion is among the most important that will take place during APFSD, as achieving carbon neutrality is critical to our region and to meeting the global aspirations of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. Last week, ESCAP released the Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report 2021, which indicated that the region is not on track to achieve the 2030 Agenda. One of the most alarming findings is that the region has regressed on climate action, and the situation in our region is worse than it was in the year 2000. Nearly half of all global CO2 emissions are from this region. Yet our analysis indicates climate change policies across the region are not ambitious enough to change the course. So we need to draw from the leadership of countries that have set carbon neutrality targets and encourage more countries to make similar commitments. There are some encouraging signs. 8 countries, namely Bhutan, Fiji, Japan, Maldives, Marshall Islands, Nepal, New Zealand, and South Korea in our region have announced carbon neutrality targets by 2050, China by 2060, and Singapore in the second half of the century. I note that we have a representative from Nepal in the panel today and look forward to hearing how Nepal seeks to achieve its target. Achieving carbon neutrality will take political commitment, cooperation across all levels of government, transformative change in energy, transport, and other sectors, new solutions to infrastructure, development, and finance. First, countries must make a clear and determined shift away from fossil fuels. Countries must phase out coal use and fossil fuel subsidies, which are prominent in our region. For emissions to peak and decline as needed, we require these phase-outs to begin now. Secondly, we must accelerate transitions and investment in renewable energy. Half of the global energy consumption is in our region. Decarbonization of power generation is an imperative to achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. Nature-based solutions must also be leveraged to lead us towards carbon neutrality. Biofuels, green infrastructure, eco-solutions in sectors from tourism to transport can cut emissions, increase resilience, and reduce risks and vulnerabilities. As we look forward to building back better post-COVID-19 and the pathway toward carbon neutrality, economic recoveries and decarbonization should go hand in hand. COVID-19 recovery packages are being designed and implemented At the same time, countries are updating their NDCs. We know that globally, a green recovery could cut expected emission in 2030 by up to 25%. Building Back Better should foster climate responsive, low carbon and disaster resilient development, green jobs, and include a prohibition on carbon intensive investment. Achieving carbon neutrality must be a whole of society effort. It requires leadership from national government, but can only be realized if subnational and local governments are involved, private sector engaged, and civil society and individuals all become partners. Regional cooperation is also essential, as the pathways for developed and developing countries will be different. But sharing good practices, building capacities, and mobilizing climate finance must all intersect. The UN system has come together in the region through the issue-based coalition on climate change mitigation and air pollution. One of the co-organizers of this side event, the IBC is led by ESCAP and UNEP, along with other UN agencies in the region. And I'm very pleased that Deshan Sering, Regional Director of UNEP, is in the panel. We are working together to help raise ambition on climate action in NDCs and to accelerate the phase out of coal. I wish you a fruitful discussion, and I pledge ESCAP support to assist countries to realize their carbon neutrality targets. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Armida. Now what I'd like to do is welcome Professor Yukari Takamura from the Institute for Future Initiatives from the University of Tokyo to deliver a keynote speech. Dr. Takamura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to share my slide. So thank you, but I hope you can see the slide. It is okay. So first of all, thank you very much organizers, Government of Japan and Government of France, and also the ESCAP, UNEP, and the IGES. So for the providing me such a wonderful opportunity to speak on this issue with the the audience. So my topic is to introduce the trend and the move toward climate neutrality, and some suggestion for the Asian Pacific regions. As you know, that the Asia is a country which actually emit the largest part of global emissions. But at the same time, Asia is one of the region which is the most vulnerable due to climate impact. For instance, the water scarcity and the food production and the food security impact. And also the ecosystem service might be declining due to climate change. And more importantly, due to the rapid urbanization and industrialization, economic development, together with the climate change, which cause multiple stress on city and the local population. So in addition to that, the extreme climate event have an increasing impact on our security and life and the poverty situation. So as the already previous speakers mentioned, that the Paris Agreement provide for a clear long-term goal toward decarbonization. So as you know, that holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees and pursuant therefore to limit the temperature rise below about 1.5 1.5 degree above pre-industrial levels. The corresponding scale of reduction is also provided in the Paris Agreement Article 4.1, which is the net zero emission or decarbonization in the second half of this century. So as already some already mentioned, that the more than 120 countries, including plus European Union, actually, which include all G7 countries, have now pledged to reduce emission to net zero by 2050. Of course, our prime ministers already committed Japan take on the pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emission to net zero by 2050. So, which means that the more than half of all global emissions, including the commitment by China to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060 at the latest, which means that now the more than half of all global emissions covered by net zero target. Now the interest, the goal to the midterm target which correspond to the such long-term target. All countries try to raise the level of ambition of the 2030 national determined contribution. For instance, European Union has already, presented the 2030 NDC, national determined contribution, which is the reduce greenhouse gas emission by at least 55% below 1990. On the part of UK, the UK commits itself, to reducing the emission, the 68% below 1990. US is now under the elaboration of the 2030 target, and China has already announced the raising the level of ambition of the 2030 last December. So all these commitments are somehow framed in the context of green recovery from the COVID-19. So what's the implication of long-term goal? Because some ask that whether this long-term goal, for instance, the net zero by 2050, could be feasible and achievable. The question is quite clear that if we continue our current status of society and activity, and we just keep our level of emission reduction, we never achieve that target. We have a huge emission gap between what we are currently and what we should achieve, corresponding in consistency with the long-term goal under the Paris Agreement. So why then we fix this long-term goal? Because we change the course of society and action in consistency with the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement, which is the more sustainable and decarbonized society. So this target long-term goal actually have quite a significant impact on the action of the non-state actors, starting with the local authority, which was already mentioned by our Vice Minister Kondo. Then I think that I skip here, and also a couple of examples will be presented in the panel discussion later. I then focus on the action taken by the business sectors. You might know that Science-Based Target Initiative, this is a target which encourage the company to take on the commitment consistent with the long-term target under the Paris Agreement. So now the more than 1,200 companies have committed to having such target, and already out of 647 of which have already set the certified science-based target, which is consistent with the Paris long-term goal. Some more than 400 companies has set a 1.5 degree goal, which is a net zero emission by 2050. So that is a list of Japanese companies which already committed themselves to have such target, and already almost 100. You can see that quite a representative Japanese companies such as Sony, and the iron and the coal. And also, I here show you that the some SVT's company, I mean the company which has already set the science-based target, or the science-based target is under preparation in ASEAN. So you can see that this movement is actually expanding not only in the developed world but also the other area of the globe. So outside this science-based target, for instance, the vehicle company and also the energy company has also committed themselves to net zero by 2050 or earlier. Why business taking such a lead even before the government, national government and local authority? I think that there are 4 drivers. One driver is they are getting aware of increasing risk of climate impact. I think you have already feel that some increasing risk of climate impact, especially due to extreme event. Actually, Japan had experienced quite a severe typhoon damage, and this economic loss actually amount to quite large, even more than the 23 or 25 billion US dollar per year. So this trend actually not only Japanese trend, but also the global trend. That is one of the reasons why that the business taken lead, because they feel the economic loss caused by the climate-related disaster and extreme event. The second driver is come from the global companies which wish to decarbonize its own business as well as its supply chain. For instance, one of the example is Microsoft. As you might know, that Microsoft have a quite ambitious target. For instance, carbon negative by 2030, or remove its historical carbon emission by 2050. Their scope 1 and 2 emission, which is emission emitted directly from their business, is getting approach almost to near zero. And they wish to achieve the zero emission of its own business by the middle of this decade, by 2025. Now their focus is how to reduce the scope 3 emission, which is the emission from the supply chain of Microsoft. That means that they wish to reduce emission from the company with which Microsoft has contract. So for doing so, their target is actually reducing scope 3 emission from supply chain by more than half by 2030 by taking new steps. One of the important steps is that by July of this year, Microsoft will begin to implement new procurement processes. To select their, select their, supply chain company, and to enable and incentivize its supplier to reduce their scope 1, 2, and the 3 emissions. That means that if the company wish to be selected as supplier for Microsoft, the company requested to reduce emission from its own business, as well as from the emission from its supply chain. So the same thing happened with Apple. Apple wished to reduce emission, and through especially increasing the use of the renewables. Then Apple requests their supplier to use the renewable power to produce Apple product. So especially by 2030, it's come from its 2030 target. So already the 71 manufacturing partners as of the July 2020 committed to 100% renewable use for Apple production. So then some companies such as Sony now raising a voice that if the Japanese energy policy corresponds to the decarbonizing trend of globe, Sony actually warned that they might have to move away their factory out of Japan because of the difficulty in procuring the renewable. So this is felt as business risk on the part of companies, especially providing the supply to the global, companies such as which seek and the decarbonized supply chain, such as Microsoft and Apple, as I mentioned. So that I think this supply chain decarbonization supply chain trend is quite a big driving force for the business to take the lead for decarbonization. The third driving forces, they come from the financial institution and investors. You might know that now the ESG investing is expanding, starting from the first three from Europe and then the United States and Canada, and now come to Japan and other parts of the world. So this investing is that the investor make an investment by taking due account on the environment and social issues and the governance. Especially the climate change is a top issue in the environmental consideration. So these investors request the company to undertake disclosure of climate-related risk. So in line with the guideline, elaborated by the task force under the G20. So this kind of disclosure requested. For instance, company have to analyze its own climate-related risk. For instance, if the society moving towards a decarbonizing world, such as the carbon neutrality by 2050, what kind of risk might occur to its business? And also, if the climate change impact risk or aggravating, in that case, what kind of impact which might occur to its businesses. So the business company have to analyze such climate-related risk with a long-term perspective and disclose these risks together with the strategy to how to cope with it. So the investor is quite active to make an engagement or change the course of company, especially their focus is on the disclosure of this information and also the decarbonizing the emission across the company's supply chain value chain. So the last not least, we could not forget that the big change in the global market. I pick up two examples here. One example is the change of power market. You can see with this slide. Historically, since 1970, the share of renewable is actually quite stable in the global power mix. You can see that, the almost stable as share in the power generation mix. But after 2010, this trend had drastically changed, and it will projected that this change will accelerate it. So the trend, the shift to the renewable and the power market we have never experienced since 1917. And I think this kind of unprecedented energy shift to renewable should be taken into account. This comes due to the declining cost of declining generation cost of renewable. You can see that in 2014, in many parts of globe, including Asia, the fossil fuel is the cheapest, power generation source. But 2020, you can see that some part of Asia, of course, still remain, but largest part of globe is now enjoy declining cost of renewable. So you can, with this slide, that how much this, the power shift to renewable is the unprecedented, in terms of scale and also in terms of speed. But another example of change, this kind of energy transition actually caused a big change in the financial flow and investment. Even in the midst of COVID-19 in 2020, energy transition investment, the record highest level. If you look at here, the renewable energy investment or investment in especially electrified transport is experienced a big increase in the energy transition investment. The second example of the market change is the vehicle market. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, the global sale of vehicle has declined. But even with such trend of global sale, electric vehicle had the increased dramatically, especially the three global market, which is the Europe and the United States and China. So with that, I'd like to highlight that we have to recognize the changing approach in climate policy. First, the government now present and share the long-term vision and goal to facilitate understanding of a scale of program and identify challenging. It's also successfully incentivize innovation, the investment, action by state and non-state actors, including businesses. And also, climate policy is now focused on the how to internalize and mainstream climate-related risk consideration into business strategy and decision making. I think I already presented that financial disclosure is now requested, and also the investors evaluate based on these information, and the investor also encourage the business to decarbonize its business and its supply chain. So the third point that I like to highlight is that climate action, together with the energy shift to renewable, and provide we recognize that the climate action bring multiple benefits rather than the emission reduction. For instance, the energy transition will now recognized considered as enhancing reduction of air pollution. And also, they reduce the fossil fuel import bill and avoid the premature deaths from air pollution. So, the last not least, the climate policy is now considered as a part of stimulus package from the recovery from the COVID-19. I think I already mentioned that. So, we recognize that this trend or policy approach is now expanding to the other areas such as plastic reduction or circular economy, even the community development and SDGs achievement. So that this kind of policy is not only to limited to the climate area, climate change, but also now the more broader area of environmental protection and development. So to wrap up, I think to consider how to make a transformation towards decarbonizing our region, I think that these points are very important. First point is a clear long-term goal. This clear long-term goal is essential to identify challenge for our region and the individual country and even company. It is possible to enhance the understanding of the challenges and provide incentive for action and investment taken by private sectors. So how to then elaborate such clear long-term goal with a science-based goal, with scientific evidence? That is one of the area for collaboration in the region. Second is as I mentioned, that the changing approach in climate policy. How to integrate and mainstreaming climate consideration with long-term horizons such as 2050 and the decision-making of all level. All level means at the governmental level and local authority, company, and financial institutions. That is also the very important area for collaboration. For doing so, I think that we could not miss two key directions with different time horizon. First is R&D for developing new technology is very much important to provide a solution for the decarbonization. But at the same time, accelerating existing technologies diffusion to reduce emission as much as possible because of the climate emergency situation. Definitely, these 10 years before 2030 is a decisive decade to mitigate our future climate risk. And also the company facing to reduce quickly their emission or decarbonization and its business and supply chain, so that accelerating existing technology diffusion to reduce emission as much possible is one of the industrial policy to enhance competitiveness of industry. So I cited a couple of area of collaboration, but especially for cities, action for decarbonization have additional opportunity to solve other issues such as air pollution, in addition to mitigation of future climate risk. And also with the business trend, as I mentioned, the decarbonization for cities, it's opportunity to attract businesses seeking to decarbonize its business and supply chain. Last not least, but for businesses, since our supply chain and the economy in the region are very much interlinked, I think the strategic collaboration toward decarbonization will provide a mutual benefit, such as the improving competitiveness and resilience through the energy cost, reducing energy cost, and also the providing strengthen the resilience. And collaboration between businesses I think will enhance the corporate value and the financial market and from supply chain. In this context, that the many business require or request decarbonizing its supply chain, and businesses. Of course, that good opportunity to provide new market, and the businesses provide the co-innovation for the region to solve the climate change issue and air pollution and others. Thank you very much for your attention. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Takamura. Next, we're going to have a video presentation from Dr. Henry Weissman. He is the coordinator of the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Initiative at IDDRI. He's also co-author of the 1.5 degree report from IPCC.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Henri Weissman. I'm the director of the Deep Decarbonisation Pathway Initiative at IDRI, and I've also been a co-author in the IPCC special report on global warming to 1.5 degree. Given time difference, I'm unfortunately not be able to participate to this event in real time. But I would like to thank the organizers of this event, and notably the French Embassy to Thailand, to have organized the possibility for me to share a few introductory remarks to this very important side event. So I'd like to share thinking about some lessons on the challenges and opportunities of carbon neutrality with a scientific perspective. And more specifically, I would like to share with you a few key messages emerging from this IPCC report on global warming of 1.5 degrees C, which was released on October 2018. In two words, these IPCC reports aim at assessing the scientific literature to deliver policy relevant messages that can be derived from science to guide decisions. When it comes to carbon neutrality, most of the lessons from the IPCC report are derived from this analysis of the scenarios and the carbon emission scenarios that are compatible with the Paris Agreement goal. So here you have one of the key figures that you can find also in the summary for policymakers, which plots the trends of global total net CO2 emissions against time, so from 2010 to 2100. So these are the trajectories of carbon emissions that are consistent with the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. And the two key features that can be identified from this graph is that if we want to be collectively in line with the global goal, we need to implement a rapid decrease of global net CO2 emissions, so reaching a reduction by 20 to 45% in 2030 with respect to 2010 levels. But, and that's the topic of the discussion today, we also need to reach global carbon neutrality between 2050 and 2070. And so the carbon neutrality is a requirement for achieving the Paris Agreement temperature goal of keeping the temperature, global temperature well below 2 degrees C. From this IPCC report and this assessment of the literature, one can identify a few key messages regarding the ways to implement this carbon neutrality, and notably highlighting that carbon neutrality requires systemic changes at an unprecedented scale in all sectors by 2050. Concretely, we are talking about massive changes in energy, so notably aiming at zero emission electricity and in particular no unabated coal left in the system by 2050. Massive changes in industry. Obviously, energy efficiency is critical, but it's not enough. And massive changes in processes and the structure of production will also be required. We also need massive changes in transport, for example, implementing and developing zero emission vehicles, but also massive model shift, behavioral changes, urban and infrastructure evolutions consistent with completely change of the way mobility is developed. And finally, massive changes are also required in the land use sector to maximize carbon sinks, so the capacity to absorb carbon from the atmosphere in natural systems while ensuring food production. Very concretely, how to guide the achievement of this and how to understand the requirements of this transformation in all systems. To this aim, the Paris Agreement has notably introduced an instrument, the long-term low emission development strategies in its Article 4.19, which are meant to help countries explore how they can transform towards carbon neutrality. And the investigation of these long-term low emission development strategies is notably the topic of the Deep Decarbonisation Pathway Initiative that I'm leading on behalf of IDRI, which is covering 25 and more countries. And you can find all the results at the web link indicated here. But just to share a few key lessons learned from this exercise is that carbon neutrality is actually feasible in all the contexts we have investigated. And these contexts include both developing and developed economies. Carbon neutrality can be consistent with domestic socio-economic priorities, economic growth, and sustainable development. This long-term perspective is also key to inform short-term decisions and the sequencing of actions in order notably to avoid taking short-term decisions that would create risks of locking into carbon-intensive trajectories. Lessons include also the need for policy packages to be constructed according to identified physical transformation and adjusted to fit the domestic context. So there is no silver bullet that would solve all the problem in all contexts, but rather the need to tailor all the policy packages to the specificities of each country context and the need for each country to address the question according to its circumstances. And finally, a very important point is that national deep decarbonization and the achievement of carbon neutrality is possible, but depends also on the implementation of critical international enablers. And so it's a collective requirement to imagine the solutions that will also support the achievement of this ambitious long-term trajectory at the country level. So with it, I will stop there. Happy to be in touch, and I wish everyone a very successful event. Thank you very much for your attention, and I pass the floor to my colleagues for the rest of the panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Weissman. Now I'd like to turn to the panel discussion. And the moderator for this panel discussion is none other than Professor Kazuhiko Takeuchi, the president of IGES. The theme of discussion is actions and partnerships to achieve carbon neutrality in the Asia-Pacific region. Takeuchi-sensei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your introduction. It is my pleasure to be a moderator for this panel discussion. First of all, I would like to invite our distinguished panelists, Mr. Inoda Kazuhiro from Kyoto City, Mr. Vincent Binarao from Quezon City, Dr. Radha Wagu from the Ministry of Forest and Environment of the Government of Nepal, and Ms. Dechen Chering from UNEP ROPE. And last but not least, Professor Joashri Roy from AIT, and also the Jadavpur University. So let me start by my framing presentation using the several slides. The main issue is how we could help decarbonization dominoes in the Asia and Pacific context. As all of you know, this year, as well as 2016, was the warmest year on the record. And therefore, we need to seriously consider about the urgency of the meet of challenges against climate change. If you look at the Asia-Pacific landscape, this is data showing by the SCAP recent results. As Dr. Armida already said in her remarks, that some of the SDGs are even retrogressing. As you can see, SDG number 12 on sustainable consumption and production, and also the 13, the climate action. Therefore, we need to accelerate our ambitious way of reforming our society toward net zero society. And Japan, as well as other Asian countries, are now declaring to achieve the net zero society by the year 2050. And we are very fortunate that the US joined to this initiative to achieve the 2050 net zero by the year 2050 in the world. And in order to facilitate, because Asia is emitting about half of the CO2 emissions, how we could decarbonize the Asia Pacific is a key for the global sustainability. And in order to do so, we need to collaborate each other. This is an example of the collaboration between the Tokyo Metropolitan Government and the city of the Kuala Lumpur in decarbonization process. And we are very pleased that IGES is facilitating these exchanges and also the technological exchanges and human exchanges. And we are now trying to consider about how we could not only utilize most advanced technology, but most cost-effective way of solving the problems. And so this is a way that we are now trying to further develop. So this is a Zero Carbon City International Forum, which will be held from 17 and 18 March 2021. And IGES is coordinating the fora that are helping decarbonization dominance to all the countries and the cities as well as the private sector. So now I'd like to invite panelists to make a short presentation to share their initiatives, starting by Mr. Inoda Kazuhiro from Kyoto City. So floor is yours.
Inoda from Kyoto City government. I'm participating from the Japanese local government. So then I would like to make a presentation about the Kyoto City initiative about the world climate and world environment. So Kyoto City has 1.46 million population with 38 universities and universities, and about 10% of the population are students. And so we have succeeded 1,000 years of culture and history and urban functions. And so Nikkei Shimbun has awarded us with a high level ranking and the SDGs promotion. And Kyoto is known for the Kyoto Protocol and has been working very hard in the environmental policies with the ordinance specializing in the countermeasures for the global warming. And as you can see, the waste amount was halved, and also the energy consumption in comparison to the peak time has reduced by 28%. And today, I'm going to talk about the recent topic from Kyoto City, and climate change countermeasures of the Kyoto City was triggered by the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. And in 2019, 49th General Assembly of IPCC was held in Kyoto. And the Mayor Kadokawa, for the first time as a head of the Japanese local government, made a declaration that Kyoto City will aim for zero emission by 2050. And in the symposium, made the declaration that of the Kyoto Appeal, aiming towards 1.5 degree goal. And in the 49th General Assembly of IPCC, the guideline was formulated, which calculates the greenhouse gas emission, which is indispensable for the implementation, execution of the Paris Agreement. And this has the nickname of IPCC Kyoto Guideline. And the zero emission declaration was supported by Minister Koizumi, and it has spread to 317 local governments across Japan. In October 2020, Prime Minister Suga has declared the 2050 zero emission, which became the country or the national target. And we're going to take on challenges so that we will make further contribution to the decarbonization. And we have joined the Decarbonization Federation from Japan for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Inoda. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Vincent Vinarao from the Quezon City. Floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. On behalf of our Honorable City Mayor, Joy Belmonte, first we would like to thank the organizers for inviting Quezon City to participate in this event. I am Vincent Pinarao, acting Assistant Department Head of the Quezon City Environmental Protection and Waste Management Department. We are in charge of implementing initiatives on climate change and environmental sustainability. Being the biggest city in terms of land area and population, among the 17 cities and municipalities forming Metropolitan Manila, Quezon City recognizes its role in terms of positively contributing to the country's efforts in climate change mitigation and adaptation. We are actually signatory to various international commitments such as Deadline 2020, which basically pursues ambitious climate action primarily to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase climate resilience. To ensure responsive climate action plan, we have undergone strategic process for a more science-based approach. We have built our evidence base with the completion of the GHG emissions inventory and scenario modeling, as well as the climate risk assessment. Another important component is the inclusive climate action needs assessment, because we consider inclusivity, especially of the most vulnerable sectors in the whole process, to truly achieve the goal of uplifting the quality of life of our citizens, given the threats brought about by climate change. With the evidence base, we were able to identify priority climate actions in the energy, building, transport, and waste sectors to achieve our initial target, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% under a business as usual scenario in 2030. And of course, to increase our community's adaptive capacities to key climate risks such as heat, typhoons, and flooding and drought. For energy, our aim is to secure clean and affordable renewable energy through solarization of our public schools and city-owned buildings and facilities, as well as promoting medium to large-scale renewable installation in high energy consuming sectors and establishments. For the building sector, initiatives will focus on energy efficiency measures in commercial, manufacturing, and households through our amended Green Building Code and also mainstreaming disaster risk reduction standards in infrastructures. For transport, sustainable mobility actions will be implemented, such as the promotion of biking and walking, integration of a bus rapid transit system, the deployment of electric vehicles and fuel-efficient vehicles, and of course, mass railway transit systems. And last, for waste, we will be focusing on waste reduction strategies, management and processing of organic waste, the promotion of circular economy, as well as the strengthening of the city's wastewater treatment and septage management program. We know that the task at hand will not be easy, and Quezon City is not alone in our pursuit for environmental sustainability, as we have excellent support from other countries and cities such as the Ministry of Environment Japan and Osaka City, together with Oriental consultants, as well as from various networks and organizations such as C40 Cities, CLAY, and others. And then for the past years, we were fortunate to be given numerous technical assistance. With the help from our partners, we're confident that we can achieve our goals for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vinarao. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Radha Wagu from the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Nepal. Because of the change of our flight schedule, she is now at the airport. I hope that she could deliver the speech. Dr. Wagu. Maybe now she left to take a flight. Dr. Wagu. Okay, then I would like to move to next panelist, Ms. Dechen Chering from UNEP Rope. Dechen, floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, Takeuchi Sensei, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to express my appreciation to the Ministry of Environment of the Government of Japan, the Embassy of Japan in Thailand, and the Embassy of France in Thailand for inviting me to speak at this side event. We have 17 countries in our region. They've submitted nationally determined contributions in 2020, and we've had 8 countries that have made pledges, carbon neutrality pledges, and previous speakers have already talked about these pledges. But we have 41 countries that are yet to make similar pledges. So my focus today will be on the UN's arm of the Regional Collaborative Platform, the issue-based coalition on climate change mitigation and air pollution, which brings together 15 UN agencies working collaboratively in addressing climate change and air pollution issues in the Asia and the Pacific region. The work and support under this issue-based coalition is really structured around 4 specific objectives. We are working to raise ambitions on climate action through nationally determined contributions. We're looking to accelerate action on air pollution in Asia Pacific to move towards achieving the World Health Organization's air quality guidelines by 2030. We're working to accelerate phase out of coal in Asia Pacific and making COVID-19 related fiscal measures climate responsive. So if you look at the adverse impacts of climate change, they continue to be a threat to our region's economy, livelihoods, natural environment. But our region continues to have many of the big emitters of carbon dioxide. And when we look at emissions, they range from 0.25 to 12 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. We see share of carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel consumption almost 50% of the global total in 2019. We see shares of emissions in coal generation increasing. It was 51% in 2000 and 62% in 2018. And if we look at the announcements of coal emissions, we continue to see it rise. So given the rise of the emissions, the abatement potential, the work of the nationally determined contributions, we are trying to work to build ambition to support countries. Some of it is policy-related work in terms of policy briefs, capacity building. We're also working to establish a regional carbon pricing mechanism. The work on coal phase down also includes enhancing regional cooperation, developing knowledge, tools, country fact sheets, advocacy materials, a coal monitor and tracking tools. And the idea is to establish a platform for dialogue and building buy-in of country parliamentarians, key private sector, financial sector players. Thank you, Takuchi Sensei.
Thank you very much, Dechen-san, for your remarks. Now I'd like to invite Professor Joshri Roy from AIT as well as Jadavpur University. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much and good day to everybody. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak in today's panel. And this is on actions and partnerships to achieve carbon neutrality in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm Joyce Roy. Currently, I'm with Asian Institute of Technology at Thailand as Bangabandhu Chair Professor, and now on leave from Jadavpur University in India. I have been the coordinating lead author of industry chapter for IPCC 4th and 5th assessment reports. And for 1.5 special report, I was co-leading the chapter on sustainable development, eradication of poverty, and reducing inequality. In 6th assessment report, I'm co-leading the chapter on demand, services, and social aspects. In IPCC 1.5 report on global warming, one set of new science-driven information we could show, which had very high policy relevance. That is that mitigation actions can advance multiple sustainable development goals, and it is possible to get maximum co-benefits of sustainable development goals by focusing on energy demand side options. It is possible to achieve low energy demand through deployment of technological, social, business, and innovations. And once we do the low demand scenario, then we can see that need for decarbonization of energy supply sector actually reduces sharply. So on this issue, currently I'm working on 3 projects which are for this region. One is on sustainable energy sector options and pathways for Bangladesh. We have published 2 special issues of International Energy Journal, which presents open access to various aspects of these topics, exclusively focusing on Bangladesh. And the second one is in collaboration with RITE, the Research Institute of Innovation Technology for Earth in Japan. And we are trying to build a research network to strengthen the demand side research for the South Asian region. And the third one is a collaborative efforts among the EDF in US, Global Change Program of Jadavpur University, and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, to develop the IDEA model, which is an open source model to develop 100% renewable scenarios for India. I have mentioned the links where you can go and get a little more information on these. And all these research are showing that in this decisive decade of 2021 to 2030, multiple actions can be taken up towards carbon neutrality in this region, especially when we have the money and finance for the post-COVID recovery period. Thank you very much. I'll stop here now.
Thank you very much, Professor Roy, for your
You are on mute, Professor.
Thank you very much for sharing valuable and very useful experiences. Now let me hear opinions from the panelists to further promote decarbonization and good practices in cities. Could you tell us how should we proceed such efforts, including the point of recovery from COVID-19 and acceleration of achieving SDGs? Starting, I would like to ask Mr. Inoda to respond to my
では質問の方にお答えいただきたいと思います。In Kyoto City, so we are preparing the plan for climate change actions, and so for the past 10 years, as our mayor always says, it's the countermeasure for the climate change and the decarbonization must be driven by the citizens and the businesses. So the sense of urgency and also the targets must be shared clearly. So in terms of the sense of urgency, there's the scientific evidence that without efforts, the temperature can rise to 4 degrees. And also as for the targets, we clearly set the target towards 2050, and we share this with the citizens and promote the transformation of the businesses. And in regards to the business countermeasures, we have small, medium, and large-scale businesses, and in each of the segments, we have been enhancing our initiatives. And also, we added to the obligation of the corporations to report the energy usage. And for the small companies, it was very difficult for them to implement efforts, but they're going to federate themselves, and so that within the federation or the group of small corporations, they can make an effort to make changes. And we would like to promote this activity. The Kyoto City, in terms of the reduction of the greenhouse gases, we have the target to reduce it by 10% in 15 years, and so we would like to work towards that goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inoda, for your remarks. I would like to ask now Mr. Binarao to express your opinions.
Yeah. Well, this pandemic has been a tremendous challenge given that we are the biggest city in Metro Manila. On the other hand, this is also an opportunity for the city to pursue a better normal. And for us, achieving this means pushing for behavioral change while considering the co-benefits and synergies in public health, environmental sustainability, and aggressive climate action. With this, the city formulated a recovery plan for the next 2 years, and part of it are 5 main themes on environmental sector. First is on environmental, sustainable, and cleaner transport, which include the bike sharing project, the green, open, reclaimed access lane project to enhance walking experience, development of air quality management plans to improve air quality, and deployment of electric vehicles. Second deals with the reduction of single-use plastics with our Bring Your Own Bottle project, promotion and distribution of reusable, washable eco bags and reusable dining wares, and implementation of the Buy Request protocol for takeout. Just recently, we launched the Trash to Cashback program to increase recovery of recyclable plastics and promote circular economy. With this project, recyclable materials can be traded and converted into points, which can be used to exchange for grocery items. Next is on improved flood and drainage management with the supply installation of rainwater harvesting systems while also using solar PV technology, implementation of the responsible water use campaign, and the formulation of a drainage master plan. Fourth includes our plan to repurpose our open spaces. Our plan is to expand and improve our green spaces by creating more green belts. We will also develop the Quezon City Urban Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan for Biodiversity Conservation. As part of the city's food security strategy, we are starting to redevelop open spaces into edible gardens and fruit-bearing trees and vegetables. Urban farming will also be intensified in the city with displaced workers tapped as community farmers. And lastly, for our initiatives for better sanitation and waste management, priorities given to infectious waste, disinfection, and general solid waste collection. Efforts in waste segregation have been doubled to prevent transmission of the virus, and our barangay materials recovery facilities were also enhanced for community-based cleanliness and proper waste management. Biodigesters will also be installed in public markets as a waste diversion strategy since biodegradable waste comprise at least 50% of the city's waste. This can also be a source of organic soil conditioner, which can be used in our parks as well as in our urban parks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Binarao. Now I'd like to ask Dechen-san to deliver your thoughts.
Thank you very much. UNEP estimates that global greenhouse emissions must fall by 7.6 per year from 2020 to 2030 to keep within the Paris Agreement goals of 1.5 degrees. Cities represent almost 2/3 of the global energy demand, 70% of carbon emissions from the energy sector. 2/3 of the growth in global energy demand in 2050 will come from cities. We're also going to see a large portion of new buildings, equivalent to 40% of the world's current stock, will be built in cities. On the other hand, cities face the impacts of climate. We know rising temperatures, urban heat islands. They drive up demand for cooling, which will consume up to 60% of peak power in many cities, Delhi, Hanoi. So we need climate ambitions and nationally determined contributions. And we also need to look at long-term strategies to reduce greenhouse gas and implementation of climate action to support decarbonization efforts in cities. So if I can highlight a few priority actions that can help to drive decarbonization efforts in cities. So we talk about energy efficiency, which offers the least cost path to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We talk about energy efficient appliances, energy efficient standards for buildings, strengthening existing standards. This would result in significant savings. UNEP's leading a 3% energy efficiency improvement initiative to help countries benefit from energy efficiency. This is a potential for decarbonization. Renewable cooling can also lower energy costs and negative environmental impacts. There are technologies such as district cooling, nature-based solutions, solar-powered cold storage, but these have to be aggressively implemented. There is a cool coalition, and it's a coalition to help countries reduce consumption for cooling. A number of countries in the region, when we start to look at China, India, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, they are setting ambitious targets for switching to e-vehicles. So you talk about renewable electricity to reduce emissions from the energy sector. I thank you.
Thank you, Dechen-san, for introducing various activities, including activities initiated by UNEP. Now I'd like to ask Professor Roy to deliver your.
I would say that, IPCC report is clear that urban land use planning and infrastructure design shapes the choice of city population. And in sixth assessment report, we are trying to show in our chapter how much can be reduced by infrastructure design, socio-cultural practice changes, and also the technology. The renewable energy penetration through urban rooftop programs and electrification of urban mobility through electric trains, buses, trucks, auto rickshaws, and cars can not only decarbonize electricity use in urban areas, but also reduce air pollution completely. And this was one of the most important observation in the cities during the COVID. So one of the positive things that we all saw, right? So how it can change the urban climate. And so, but we also need, cycling lanes and walking lanes to help reducing emissions. So human settlement design and building codes, zero energy building, nature-based solution, urban agriculture, vertical garden, rooftop garden, rainwater harvesting, all can help not only residential buildings, but also commercial and institutional buildings. And digitization and circular economy are the two mega trends which can have huge potential for urban areas for managing decarbonization. Now, opportunities in South Asia is very high because our research shows almost 70% of the infrastructure will be built in this decade itself. So we can make these infrastructures such that it doesn't get locked in the with high carbon infrastructure. So in some of our publications, we show how just enhanced energy efficiency mission of Government of India has helped in decoupling India's growth from emissions. And policy implementation is helping in scaling up building codes and comfortable public transport system. Digitization is helping the shared mobility. And these are changing the cityscape in terms of emission in Indian cities. While I parallelly do the work on Bangladesh, I see that there is huge scope for renewable energy penetration and energy efficiency implementation and building code implementation, which has the climate-friendly building codes and energy efficiency building codes. So there is expansion of there is scope for expansion of portfolio of renewables going beyond solar and wind in Bangladesh, and we find that there is scope for leapfrogging from gas-based economy in Bangladesh to more sustainable energy sources given their whole infrastructure which exists.
Thank you very much, Professor Roy. Then I would like to ask my second and also the final question to the panelists. How do we spread the decarbonization domino to other cities, countries, and the world? 1 or 2 minutes, please, one by one. I would like to ask Mr. Inoda to...
So, in terms of the spreading the decarbonization domino, the major cities play a major role, and international cooperation between the cities is very important. There are two things. One is to participate in the international city cooperation. Kyoto City has joined the ICLEI, and he's our mayor is the chair, and also we have joined the world Association for air conditioning, and so we can make a contribution through participating into the international organizations of the cities. And also another point is the cooperation to the other cities in other countries. We have environmental study program called Kodomo Eco Life Challenge for the children, and 110,000 city children have participated, and we have exported it to Malaysia, and there's a new generation activity in place with modeled after the Kyo Ecology Center. So we would like to make the utmost effort for decarbonization around the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Inoda. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Binarao for your thoughts on how we could decarbonize Domino.
Well, for us, expanding our network, both locally and internationally, has significantly helped us in sharing our initiatives on climate change. But at the same time, this also gave us opportunity to learn from others and gauge where we are right now. With these networks, we were able to participate in forums such as this. And with our mayoral commitment, the city has also gained recognition as one of the major movers in terms of climate action. We are from a developing country and we accept the fact that we have limitations and challenges. And it comes to challenges when it comes to addressing issues on climate change and environmental sustainability. Nonetheless, city leaders are still committed to exert efforts to improve the quality of life through implementation of policies and ensuring appropriate institutional arrangements. With this, we can serve as a model to other cities with similar backgrounds and hopefully to inspire them. If a big city such as ours with many challenges can do it, others can definitely replicate what we're doing. We are also regularly reporting our efforts to the CDP to publicly disclose our climate change initiatives. And last year, we were actually included in the CDP A list together with more than 80 cities around the world and recognized as one of the leaders on environmental action despite this pandemic. I'm just looking forward once we implemented all our climate actions and we begin to track our milestones and indicators, then we can really show tangible benefits and positive impacts and prove that low carbon development is the way forward. But of course, this cannot be done without proper research and studies, as these are necessary to avoid malinvestments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Binarao. And now I would like to ask Dechen-san for delivering her thoughts. Particularly, I would like to ask you to discuss something about how we could upscale our scale in the Asia and Pacific and beyond.
Thank you. I think networks and partnerships we've talked, but we have to bring in private sector investors. We have to showcase efforts, and it has to be policy and practice. So we talk about enhanced regional cooperation, but we have to focus on cross-border power system connectivity. Stopping investment in coal power plants, shutting down existing capacities is going to be important to meeting the global benchmark for coal phase down. We have to phase out subsidies to provide a level playing field for renewables. I think UNESCAP and UNEP are working together to establish an energy technical panel for guiding the coal phase down work in Asia, taking into account just transition, but we really need sort of focused efforts from coal towards renewables. I think I've talked about the Cool Coalition. It's an outcome of the UN Climate Action Summit and network of 100 partners to support governments, industry to take action on sustainable cooling. So I invite partners to join this because it provides access to food, vaccine, clean energy. And there's a lot of deep financial savings. We're talking about cooling efficiency, demand reduction, renewable energy measures. So joining this coalition is a way to scale up efforts. There's a lot of really important targets countries have made. Southeast Asia has aspiring target of 23% renewables. But when we've looked at all these scenarios, we still can't see it going beyond 20% renewable energy. So what we need is, we really need countries to support rapid scale up of renewable energy. And last, we look at increasing capacity, upgrading grid planning, accelerating smart grids. We need to start to think of how we integrate renewable electricity and scale up efforts for smart grid and battery storage, coupled with very aggressive renewable energy programs. We hope this could be some of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dechen-san, for introducing newly established networks for upscaling our decarbonization dominoes. Now I would like to ask Professor Roy to deliver your remarks.
My experience says, the best option is solution-focused cross-country research collaboration among the academic institutions, joint research projects, student mobility, teacher mobility, and researcher mobility programs help in building capacity for local innovation, because local innovation is at the core of the decarbonization efforts to be sustained. You need appropriately trained human capacity to carry it forward for the longer term. As I mentioned, in our EDIT AIT network, we are trying to know jointly across different countries to know what are the good practices which can be shared across different countries. We are also trying to identify the bad practices which needs to be reduced. And for example, how microgrid or grid integration can allow flexible demand for decarbonization in these countries, which we need to economically and socially grow fast, given their poverty burden in this carbon constrained world. And IDEA model, which I said, which is the cross-institution research collaboration in India, is helping us to see what various states within India can do to decarbonize their electricity sector through power export and import, grid scale storage rather than battery storage, what policy incentives work and what doesn't work, and how to take the understanding at the regional scale going beyond Indian borders also. So if you talk of good practices, then I think that good practice sharing among the neighboring countries is a very important step which should happen. And recently I wrote a scientific article to show how, given the SDG framework, countries can actually build a soft power diplomacy around science, training, curriculum sharing, and science policy business meets. And I think this is the way forward for starting now and taking a very long run, at least through this decade, to set the development path on the sustainable development path. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Particularly, I'm very pleased that you highlighted the importance of a collaboration between the scientists as well as the educators for developing these ideas for the upscaling of our challenges, and also the importance of the collaboration between the neighboring countries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending and participating in the side events on carbon neutrality, the future of the Asia Pacific. In closing, I would like to highlight 3 points that will help bring us closer to the carbon neutral goal. First, we are going to reach net zero goals. We need to strengthen virtual integration. Different actors in multiple levels of governance, global, regional, national, and local, must be able to work together. This will often entail local governments identifying innovative solutions and national governments and international organizations helping to bring them to scale. Second, it will also be important to work across multiple stakeholders. Businesses, NGOs, and civil society must be brought into climate planning processes. Combined with my previous point, we need to move more towards multi-level, multi-stakeholder forms of governance. Third, because Asia emits nearly half of the world's CO2, it will likely be at the center of the net zero revolution. Countries in Asia will therefore need to take on increasingly ambitious goals. Further, they must be prepared to work proactively on climate with not only governments in Europe like France, UK, and Germany, but the new administration in the United States. It is this spirit of global cooperation that I close our event. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation, and please stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Takeuchi Sensei, for this excellent moderation, and thank you for the panelists for this insightful discussion. As we close this side event, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to all of the participants, over 100 of them that joined the side event. Thank you, please have a great time for the rest of the day. Thank you so much.